Now, all morning long, we've been talking about it. Today marks a somber remembrance of a deadly natural disaster that made landfall on Kauai 20 years ago. Hurricane Iniki left 6 people dead and caused nearly $2 billion in damage. The storm forever changed the way we, as a state, prepare for natural disasters. And joining us, we have a special guest this morning. We have Bob Ballard from the National Weather Service. Aloha, Bob. And we appreciate you being with us. Again, a very special morning. 2 decades ago, many Kauai residents waking up to a disaster. And I want to go back 2 decades, if we could. The night before the storm, September 10th, did we know it would impact Kauai as greatly as it did?
There were some big surprises in the forecast the night before Hurricane Iniki hit, the day before. There was a fairly sharp turn about 5 or 5:30 that afternoon on September 10th. We initially thought that the hurricane would pass about 200 miles or so south of Kauai and continue on its way. However, we did know that there was a possibility that the hurricane could make a right turn. We had briefed media, we had briefed civil defense, we talked to people, let the military know that that was a possibility. We didn't think it was a likelihood. But back then, the weather was more likely to surprise us, and it did. The worst case scenario, made that hard right turn.
And talk about Iniki's strength, because this was a Category 4 hurricane. How strong were those winds?
The winds in Iniki, when it made landfall, we think were about 130 miles per hour sustained.
Very powerful.
Gusts in some areas may have been up close to 200 miles an hour or even higher. A lot of the anemometers that were on Kauai broke, got ripped off when the high winds started, and so we may never know exactly how strong Iniki was, but that's our good estimate.
A ballpark figure.
Right.
And talk about how quick the storm moved through the island, because you kind of had an approximate time, right?
Sure. The next morning, the weather was starting to go downhill, but already we were still seeing like warm and muggy conditions. The winds were fairly light, but by 1 o'clock that afternoon, Iniki's full force was already slamming into Kauai, and by 3 o'clock the eye made landfall, 3 or 3:30. The eye made landfall, moved across the island very quickly, so there was only maybe a 4 or 5 hour period of really intense hurricane force winds. But of course, it only takes that much to do a lot of damage, and you can see the kind of destruction that we've seen.
Yeah, and of course, we're watching this video, and the wind is just impressive at Category 4 strength. Bob, also tell us about Hurricane Iniki. Actually was born in the East Pacific, where many of these storms, in fact, in this current hurricane season, have been born. But we have a special defense mechanism, I like to call, that's sitting east of the Big Island that helps to shield us from those hurricanes, right? Sure.
A lot of the hurricanes that develop off the coast of Mexico are usually destined to move up into the colder water of the East Pacific and dissipate fairly quickly. The ones that we get more concerned about are the ones that develop a little bit closer in the western portions of the Eastern Pacific, if that makes sense, around 140 west longitude. That's right around the area where Iniki started to regenerate and then came into the Central Pacific and intensified rapidly. Those close-in ones are the ones that really get us concerned.
And of course, we're still several months left for this current hurricane season, and we want to encourage everyone to be prepared this season. And of course, we want to thank you, Bob, for joining us on this special 20th anniversary of Hurricane Iniki. And to see this interview again, just head to the top video section of our website, KITV.com. Bob, it was great seeing you. Mahalo.
Good talking to you.
And stay with us. We'll have more coming up after the break.